Now we continue with just one phrase out of our two verses in 2 Corinthians, which are 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 15 and 16. I'll read the whole passage, and we'll look at just one little phrase in that passage. For we are to God the aroma of Christ among those who are being saved and those who are perishing. To the one we are the smell of death, to the other the fragrance of life. And who is equal to such a task? Well, technically it's a sentence, but it's just one little piece. Who is equal to such a task? Past two lessons we examined together the other parts of the verse, of the pair of verses. We looked at the fragrance of life to those who are being saved. We looked at the fragrance of death to those who are perishing, or the stench of death to those who are perishing. Now we look at Paul's little question at the end. Who is equal to such a task? You know, and you think of it as task. I've been meditating on this. Task? Is it a task to smell? I'm not talking about smell with your nose. I'm talking about smell with your armpits. I mean, you can either smell bad with your armpits or you can put some stuff on it. I got a whole bunch of stuff. People give it to me for Father's Day and all that, and it makes me smell good if I put it in my armpit. All right, yeah. Armpit. He said armpit in the Bible lesson. Oh, yay. This is real. Come on. Life is real. Get used to it. So, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Yeah, that too. Okay, so, that's a task. What is this task? Is that we being the fragrance? I have an 8-year-old son. Yeah, I really do. I have two sons. One is 38, and the other is 8. I have an 8-year-old son. And I need to be the fragrance of life to him. How do I be the fragrance of Christ? Every day, every hour that he's with me. There's a lot of things where we fall short. What about my neighborhood? What about those in the church? When I'm treated badly in the church, how do I be the fragrance of life to those who are being saved, who are there? How do I let my light shine? Who is equal to such a task? How can we do such a thing? And what about this fragrance of death? How can we bear up when we are seen as the stench of death? The more we try to live in step with the Spirit, as Paul says in another place, and in conformity with Christ, and we are seen as and condemned as and scoffed as and held in contempt as the stench of death. When we stand up for biblical truth about God creating the male and female and said, be fruitful and multiply, and people say, you are a this or that phobe. How do you stand up for that? It's not easy. Who is equal to such a task? I had a situation a year ago. Very unusual situation. Surprised me when it came along. And it involved numerous people and a complex interaction. And I want to look at two sides of it. One is that those around me close, people that I've been closest to and care about, many of them will not speak to me anymore. They won't talk to me and say, in last summer in that situation, you did wrong. They won't even mention it. But they don't talk to me. And yet I know in Christ Jesus that I, for once in my life, handled a difficult situation absolutely, each piece, each detail, as Jesus Christ wanted me to. And it involved a tremendous amount of hope that I had and a tremendous disappointment. And through all of it, I know that this time I did it God's way. And why am I saying, look, I'm bragging about how I did it God's way? The reason is, in 45 years, that's probably the only time in a situation that complex that I've done it right the whole way through. One in 45 years. So I'm not being a big braggart here, really. But one time, I got it right. And I'm held in contempt for it. There's a church I really can't go to anymore. Now, the real reason I don't go there is not because I'm afraid of their contempt, but because there's one person who it will upset, who is totally innocent in everything in the whole situation, who my presence will upset. And for that person who I care very much about, I don't go because the controversy was upsetting to that person, and my being there will remind them, and that's not good. And so for the sake of that person, I won't be there. But there are people, it's I did what was right, and I was called wrong. Who is capable of that? Who is up to such a task? Being the aroma of life, while being seen as the stench of death. We are not, and that's Paul's point. We are not able to that task. We are not sufficient to that task. We are not capable of that task. Only God is capable of that task, and he does it through us. And that is Paul's point. We are incapable of this task. So we must throw ourselves totally into the hands of God and upon his mercy.